Good day, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today about travel-related scams, particularly addressing online travel agencies. We are in a part of the year where people are starting to plan their holiday or vacation travel or holiday travel for the rest of the year, thinking about warm, sunny places for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, and maybe thinking of skiing trips if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. But now we're thinking about how that increase in traffic to travel-related sites can increase the risk of scams. And so we have brought on today our guest, Spencer Mott, recently former CISO of Booking.com and Booking Holdings, and now a travel security consultant working with many different companies and on the board of 9 different travel organizations as a security consultant, and the chief product officer of BforeAI, Luciano Allegro, and they will be talking about we're glad to have you guys. We'll be talking about travel scams. So, gentlemen, I will let you take it from here, and looking forward to hearing your chat today.
All right. Thank you, Andy, and welcome, everyone. I'm Luciano. I'm co-founder and chief product officer. And for the last 5 years, I've been challenging how companies see cybersecurity, moving from reactive to predictive and preemptive. And as Andy said, speaking of prediction, ahead of us, we'll have high season for traveling again, and there's going to be a lot of heat into this industry. Our research team had prepared a very detailed report that is going to be going out in March around scams in travel. Some of the scoops that we got from them for this conversation is that apparently now scammers are using platforms like Airbnb to distribute phishing kits as supposedly spacious and nice apartments. So the term of making money with Airbnb has definitely have a different turn in the last couple of years, as well as we are seeing a lot of impersonation of login pages, like, for example, with Skyscanner, probably to retrieve some credit card info for scams or to enable account takeovers. Now, opening this conversation myself, I'm a seasoned traveler. I always like to book my own hotels for when doing business traveling. In the problem that I always face is going through the different Google results. Appears to me that today we're having such a big influx of different official, non-official, and third-party websites that gets really confusing when choosing where to book from. So my question is, how are scammers using this more to perform scams? Kind of interesting to see. Even to me, as experienced, I always have difficulties. But I'll pass the microphone to Spencer. Spencer, you have a lot of experience here. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm delighted to be here, and Andy, Luciano, thanks for the invitation. So I'll speak a little bit from experience. So 5 years ago, after long history as chief security officer in various industries, I went into the travel sector, and frankly, I was really surprised by a number of things in terms of its attractiveness to criminal networks, nation states, fraudsters. There is a whole large number of different scams and ruses that can be applied to the industry, and not just OTAs, but the entire supply chain. I think it's just worth touching on first of all as to what's made the travel industry, and by travel I'm speaking broadly, hospitality, accommodation, flights, taxis, etc. What's made that more interesting to adversaries than typically occurred in the past. And frankly, I think what they've realized is, having kind of gone through the chain of attacking financial services some 20 years ago, attacking healthcare for the richness of the data and the criticality of the service around reliability. They then kind of fall upon the travel industry and realize that it's a very complex and distributed ecosystem with many players, all of which really have different levels of, I guess, security robustness. And then secondly, if you think about the assets or the information that those entities hold in that value chain, and by value chain, I mean, from the minute, as you described, Luciano, searching for a holiday or a trip right the way through to fulfillment, right? You've been on the trip and you kind of close the deal, if you like, until you go on another trip. There are many players involved in that with different levels of security. And then the data is really rich. It's likely within that value chain, there's credit card and payment card information. There's obviously your personal information, including email address, full name. Sometimes there's passport information because hotels might require advanced a copy of your passport or driving license, proof of ID, preferences. Many of the companies, hotel chains, OTAs, are looking to see what your preferences are, so they can serve you up better products and services that are suited to your particular persona. And of course, if you start thinking at nation state level, it gets even more interesting. You know where someone's going to be, what hotel they're going to be in, between what dates. It gets very, very interesting. So as a result of that, we find a number of different scams occurring. And this was the surprise to me, is the fact that there's so much opportunity for fraud once you break through one of the barriers in any one of those players. Right, so they're all connected in some way or another. Whether it's through an API, sometimes it's even traditional. Would you believe facts of data that still exists, or some other data exchange? But once you break through that original gate, or you're then starting to open doors inside that ecosystem to find and leverage that information, and/or steal those credentials or things of monetary value. That's number one opportunity. Number two opportunity that we see is predominantly impersonation fraud, where the hacker will start playing off the traveler against the accommodation provider, flight provider, etc. And I'll just give an example and then hand back. And it's just that many of these entities in the travel or trip ecosystem provide chat capabilities or direct communication capabilities on their platforms. You find many OTAs, and if you've used an OTA to book say a hotel, you'll find that you can direct chat with the hotel through the platform's messaging system. Now that allows the attacker, if they've broken through one of those doors, whether it be the hotel door or phish the traveler, they can start asking for things through that channel, which looks like the legitimate traveler or the legitimate hotel. And if I'm the imposter traveler, I might receive the communication from the hotel, which is a genuine false communication that says, oh, there's been a mix up in the booking, we need $200 advance payment, or if the other way, I would say to the hotel, we're going to be arriving on a certain date, please change the booking, and then I'll resell the room. I mean, it's just two examples. If I just pick out some of the scams, there's refund scams, which is really where you booked and then you get a refund as an imposter. Loyalty programs, you can kind of exploit them, and they got monetary value, so you steal points from travelers. Fake reviews, it's another scam, reputational harm. Of course, spoof websites that you kind of mentioned, right? How do you trust the website initially? How do you know it's the actual either an OTA or hotel website? And of course, I would say the big one is account takeover, and I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit more about that in our conversation. So cut to the chase, very rich ecosystem, lots of valuable things to steal, lots of frauds that can take place. But on the positive side, many of the players now are raising the bar in their security defenses, just as financial services and healthcare had to do, as they faced a wave of onslaught of hacking instances.
Wow, I'm astonished by the wide opportunity menu for scammers to use these type of platforms. And I was thinking about what you're saying, state actors, and of course, someone may first impression would be okay, but the president of the United States is not going to book in his own hotels, but someone has to do it, especially on those other countries where still have maybe less resources, and they may be using, of course, a digital platform to do that reservation, to have a trip schedule. So it seems to me that not only at state level, but I'm thinking of CEOs, executives, still very important, and to have security leverage through all these levels. It's do you have any I mean, for whatever you can share, any stories that have been seen on these specific cases, how scammers have successfully or unsuccessfully targeted this type of people, and you guys were able to stop before they even committed an attack or something like that. That could be interesting for the audience to learn more from the inside, how it unfolded and how it was handled, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you one that, from a monetary perspective, isn't massively lucrative for the attacker, but it speaks to how a lot of these scams start. Right, often these scams, and I'm talking predominantly in the hotel/accommodation sector, will start with the hacker creating a fake booking. So I go in, I give myself John Smith, I'm going to book a room at a certain hotel. And let's just look at the home sector, because it's not just hotels, right? So let's pick a home accommodation. So I'm going to book an apartment in Miami between these dates, and it's a completely fake booking. So what I've done is I created, if you like, gone through taking either a picture of an accommodation or gone through another accommodation site and then picked the pictures and basically created a listed accommodation as a fake offering. I then start taking deposits for people to come and stay in that Miami apartment, right? So a couple of things there, a couple of harms, right? One is it's an actual property with an actual, genuine address, but the poor person living in that address doesn't even know that their property's now being, if you like, marketed in a fraudulent way. The second thing, and this is a true story, is that we had such a property turn up, and what I heard was that a lawful traveller had booked the accommodation, had turned up to have the holiday of their lifetime in Miami, had been delayed in the flight, so it was like midnight, 1 a.m. in the morning, went to the apartment, had been given instructions about a lockbox so they could open the apartment. So they're moving around the outside of this apartment looking for this, key. Meanwhile, the homeowner inside is completely, hears the noise, gets spooked, right? Has access to, defend himself and his family in the property. You can see where this is going, right?
Oh my gosh!
And then comes out and confronts the poor traveller. So it could have really gone wrong. So then the traveller saying, well, I booked this accommodation, and the homeowner says, well, I know nothing about it. It's a complete scam. So the traveller's paid a deposit or paid up front entirely, turned up at someone's house, 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. They've now got nowhere to go. They've lost their money, and they've just freaked out a homeowner because these strangers have turned up at 1 o'clock in the morning knocking on the door. So, that's just an example. From a monetary perspective, you've got a single victim there, but also, the bookings occurred on a platform and has been allowed to be perpetrated without being detected, right? Because it just looks legitimate.
That is insane, and I think that the first question I asking myself, hopefully everyone is okay, that there were no health dangers there, but this definitely sets up a responsibility, if you want, for the platform to kind of acknowledge some of the cost of this misfire, call it whatever you want, because it's really a scam that went beyond the platform itself. But I'm sure that you have to involve legal, you have to involve security to understand, you have to do some audit to understand exactly how it happened, who it was, etc. So there is a lot of cost involved in that process. Is it okay to say that someone could calculate on average more or less how one of these things may cost to the company? I mean, we are not talking about the consumer because obviously there might be some insurance going on, but for the company, one of the things we always talk with our own customers is, as we are going predictive and preempting, people try to say, okay, right, we're gonna stop things before they happen, but how do I prove that I've done something good for the company? And the answer usually is, okay, so if you used to have these fires that you put off, that you would assume some kind of cost to put those fires out, and we can use that number to say, okay, well, you have preempted, you have avoided this cost for future attacks. In this case, is it easy? I mean, I'm sure there are multiple variables there, but would you say that it's something that is achievable in terms of the travel industry to say, on average, this would cost X amount of money or not?
Yeah, I mean, let's just unpacking that. You're absolutely right. The problem is increasing. Traditionally, companies that provide travel services, because they're susceptible to fraud, specifically, will effectively write off a certain amount of fraud as the cost of doing business, right? Well, that's any e-commerce site. It's just natural. You'll do all you can to prevent fraud happening through fraud detection technology and trying to stop bots attacking your site and trying to prevent scams and through authentication and identity management, etc. But ultimately X amount's going to get through. Now what's been happening is, and it's really come to light last 2 years, is with the advance of technology, specifically the ability to automate a lot of frauds, and now with generative AI and going to the extent of deep fakes, etc., the problem's become industrialized, right? So I can now automate a lot of my attacks, fire out, let's say, 1 million attempts, and if I get 1,000 back that have been successful, that's potentially an awful lot of money. I mean, just think about what one trip typically will cost for one consumer. These are high value transactions, right? $1,000-$2,000, average at least for a trip or a holiday vacation. And then, while last year, 2024, the whole industry was up around 65% in terms of growth, which is great. What we did also experience, if you kind of rely on the people that collect these figures, is the number of online fraud attacks is growing at a much faster rate than valid online transactions, to the extent of around about 230%, right? So this isn't just, it's incrementally getting worse. This is a real spike in terms of successful attacks that's generating real high revenue for the groups that are perpetrating it. And many of these groups are organized or they work in their own ecosystem where everyone plays a role. And then worse still, they resell some of the attack kits, right? Whether it's the phishing kits or the account takeover spoofs or some of the fakes, they can resell and monetize that way. So to your point about, the cost in terms of what it's costing the company, yes, I mean, for every, let's just say every account that's taken over or every lost credential, there's typically a compliance obligation now in most jurisdictions around the world, whether it, GDPR in Europe or equivalent US privacy laws and regulations that operate at state level. There's then restitution costs to the person that had their credentials leaked. There's the internal angst because you need to look at, well, how did this occur? What I will say is, and I can at least speak for OTAs, is the biggest, the most troublesome thing is the bad experience for not only the partner, the hotelier or homeowner, but for the traveler as well. The obligations around compliance and security, etc., obviously just a given, right? You improve as you learn and you keep adding different controls as the risk changes or the technique changes. but you can lose the confidence of a traveler because
Yeah.
they were let down because they were scammed, and that's the most hurtful thing for these companies. And that's the thing that generates the most activity, actually, is not to allow that to happen, at least as much as you can control it.
Yeah, that reputational cost that will impact directly into the growth projection of the quarter. So that's really interesting. I want to open the discussion to anyone in the audience looking for questions, looking to ask a question. Not sure if maybe some of our team members will give us some questions from the people.
Yeah, maybe while we're teeing up the questions, one of the points I talked about earlier is the value chain ecosystem with all these players, payment providers, hotels, homeowners, OTAs, data aggregators, marketing services, etc. Different gateways into potentially, through various connections into, where the valuable information lies, and the level of maturity and the amount of controls is different in that value chain. So I'll give you an example. A lot of hotels haven't necessarily realized the nature of the threat. I mean, I think they're raising the game now, that's for sure. But before, and if you think about the business they're in, they have to be very open and hospitable, right? So they have to, take on face value requests for a difference for services, and they have to make it easy for their traveler to book, and they have to make the check-in experience very seamless and frictionless. Now that's hard then to implement controls, and that's just front of house, right? Back of house, you have interesting mix of professionals involved in the hotel industry, right? Night porter, reservation staff, reception staff, front desk staff, etc. And often they're using shared accounts, because it's because of the nature of the work. There's lots of different people at the terminal. A traveler isn't going to sit there while multiple people are logging in with different credentials, right? It's just a bad experience. So I completely get why it needs to operate that way. I think the challenge is, and this is where good security advice and guidance is helpful, is how do you implement security in a seamless, almost invisible way, so that the experience is the same, or you could score a real goal by making it even better. But yes, the point I'm making is you'll see these different levels of security predominantly by, where there's been a motivation to invest heavily because of it, because of an instant or realization of the risk there, or how wealthy that particular player is in terms of the amount of security they can pay for it. It all comes with a cost.
And I think you're talking about something really interesting. We've seen, so for those who don't know, we've seen an increase of usage to our brand protection solution, not only to protect our customer's company brand, but also to be used as some sort of supplier scoring system, supplier protection system. They're using their same technology to kind of get predictions on impersonation attacks using those supplier brands. So for instance, at hotel, we use our same technology to kind of track these scams for either, food catering or, even maintenance companies that may have some sort of, first, they are very integrated into the operation process. And second, they may have some sort of clearance to access, the different places in the hotel. So it's really important that, having that control and being able to stop that type of communication before it's even, committed the crime, to our customers have been seen. So I think that I'm getting to that point where it's saying, it's not only about customers, it's also to protect ourselves from the supply chain and make sure that we are more conscious that this type of attacks may come from all the different places, not just from the obvious. So I'm not sure if I think I heard Andy talking a few seconds ago.
Yeah, I had a question actually. So given the rise of these AI generated, kind of threats and attacks where the scalability level is greatly increased, right? Like how does a security team, a modern security team, scale along with that threat? Like, because like on the scale of threats, maybe this is a little different based on what you were talking about in the call, Spencer, but in a lot of other industries, these would be regarded as like low level threats, right? Because they are kind of troublesome for a security team to chase down, but they're not the kind of thing that's like a major breach generally. So how do teams scale for that? How do they convince the chief financial officer, for example, to get funding to scale for this when maybe it's not always a convincing story to say, like, this is a major problem. Does my question make sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely makes sense. Yeah. And I talked a little bit earlier about the cost of doing business and how much fraud is written off in some of the bigger players in the travel and accommodation industry, right? And then, how much fraud has increased. And in those big players, it's tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So the business case, as it relates to fraud spiking, is actually not hard. But to your question about what can security teams do, well, the security team obviously is geared up to protect the business that it operates in. But I mentioned before, if you think about an OTA, that business is distributed. It involves partners, and it's a value chain that involves many people, including the traveler. So that team not only needs to look after their business, they need to try and strengthen the supply chain, which is often something they don't have direct control over, but they need to convince and show the evidence that this is, a serious enough problem, not just for the OTA, but also for let's just say for the hotel chain. And by that, there are various intelligence sharing or threat sharing mechanisms, retail hospitality information sharing and collaboration. Retail ISAC is one platform that does that, whereby, the kind of, let's say the players that have invested a lot in security are looking and researching the dark web, looking at the scams, have sample toolkits, etc. They're able to share that intelligence to make the other players harden. But there's really two areas. One is, if you do the basics well, let's say you're a hotel chain, if you do the basics well, even with the more sophisticated attack, you're going to prevent the vast majority of the issues occurring, right? Not all of them, absolutely, but the vast majority. The reality is, in the retail, the bricks and mortar sector, some of those basics aren't as good as they could be, right? We talked about one earlier, shared accounts, or outdated IT, or non-patch systems, etc. That's one area. If you kind of improve the hygiene, that really helps. The second area is, back to that security team that can afford to do this, is firstly to look at and imagine the type of scams that could occur in the future, and see the ones that are occurring almost in real time, and then react to it. And the only way you can scale, and I guess it's, the cat and mouse or the whack-a-mole situation, is by using some of the more modern security tools that have the kind of capability that the adversary is using against the victim. So, predominantly AI enabled and automated discovery response technologies.
I think that's a great answer. There is a lot to unpack and digest from it. And if anyone from the audience is from the OTA industry, definitely a lot of notes to take and good advice from Spencer. And again, I think that, this is particularly interesting as there is some kind of commoditization of certain attacks. I believe that, I've seen many companies trying to still use human beings to kind of review artificially generated attacks, and it's not sustainable. We need tools that can keep up with the amount of the speed of this. Our one of the things that I heard in other conversations is, so it really struck me is, these criminals do not have compliance to do. They can use whatever tool they want. They can use whatever things they have at their hands. But on the other side, us, we have to be respectful. We need to have compliance. We need to have ensure that their privacy laws comply. And so it definitely is not going to be enough with just putting human beings to try to tackle technology. Instead, we need to use technology to work with technology. I think there is a good question from Milda, and it's big. I think, Spencer, this one is for you. What kind of trends do you see raising right now in the travel scams that may be becoming more popular in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so I think the issue around using automated and almost mass polling using whether it's bogus booking websites, traveler booking websites, or whether it's fake bookings, or whether it's sophisticated email phishing campaigns that are circumventing many of the traditional technologies that would have worked in the past. And then what really starts to worry me is, some of the deep fake technology. So, a lot of fraud detection works on the basis of, looking for indicators of reliable identifiers, whether it be, looking at the IP address, or, looking at the construct of the message, looking at language use, looking at kind of header information, etc., if it's an email communication. But I think that's just going to become very, very difficult to detect. Good thing is, if you look at the startup sector in security, and even some of the traditional or the current platform technologies that provide security protection, bot protection, antivirus, anomaly detection, all those companies now, business commercial necessity, are putting resources in to become even more sophisticated in the defense side. So this is it's going to be this continuous game. I think, people talk about quantum. I still think quantum computing is still some way off in terms of where it's going to be used adversarially against businesses. And then, that would probably only result in enabling size and scale of attack. But I think, the sophistication of attack is where AI is going to play a big role. So these crafted AI-driven toolkits that, again, can be monetized and resold are all going to increase. What advice would I give to small businesses in the travel industry to protect themselves? I think what I said earlier is, kind of focus on the basics. There are some really cool things that can be done. I've been working with a company, for example, that provides abstraction at the desktop, at the computer level, or on the mobile device. And by that, it really puts the security in an enterprise browser that protects the device and the user from the internet, which is where the scam's taking place. A very quick solution that effectively kills at least the ATO scam completely, completely eliminates it. And then, puts less of a risk on the device condition as well, the health of the device. That's one solution. But I could talk a lot about that. But, hygiene number one, and then there's a couple of potential solutions that really help, that aren't actually that expensive, that small business could afford it.
I think following up on your comments on deepfakes, maybe in a more humorous tone, I'm really excited about that time to come. I believe I'm going to use those deepfakes on myself to maybe escape from some boring meetings in the future. But I think as you say, this is definitely, we are keeping up with technology at this point, and it's not the technology keeping up with us. It's it's really moving fast, and we're seeing some attacks leveraging this type of techs in different use cases. And for us, the startups, the challenge is how we can do so many things to the raising amount of pain points that companies have, and also users, right? I think that's mostly it. I'm not sure if there are any other questions that you want to share.
Nope. We're wrapping up the questions. Thank you so much, Spencer, for having us, or joining us, having us. We're having you, I guess. You've been a great guest. We hope you'll come back and chat with us again sometime. We want to invite everyone to next month's Valentine's themed Love is in the Air, and so are the cyber criminals, talking about online airline ticket scams. And as Spencer Mott so aptly included, we may even talk about frequent flyer and loyalty point scams as well. So thank you very much, Spencer, for joining us today. And we're really just delighted to have had you, and look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, no, it's great. I really had a good time. And if there's any questions, then everyone can find me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic.
Right. Take care.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, guys.